The Southern Poverty Law Center, which started out as an organization to fight for civil rights, an organization that was aimed at squarely against the Ku Klux Klan. I met many years ago a Southern white guy named Morris Dees, who I thought was a pretty nice guy at the time, an affable guy who was leading the Southern Poverty Law Center. And his goal was to identify people with Klan sympathies. The Klan, of course, still had a presence in America stretching out into the 1960s and 70s. So there was residual Klan sympathy. And this is what the Southern Poverty Law Center was set up to fight. But over time, the Southern Poverty Law Center just became a tool of the left, actually sort of largely forgot about the Ku Klux Klan, and now began to engage in the business of classifying groups as hate groups, except the groups classified as hate groups are like, what? The Heritage Foundation, the NRA, the American Enterprise Institute. I mean, groups that have nothing to do with hate, unaffiliated with the Klan, in fact, abhor the Klan. These are groups that are part of mainstream conservatism that are falsely smeared by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups. And the latest addition to the Southern Poverty Law Center's roster of hate groups is, guess what? Parental rights organizations that are fighting for control over their own children. This is unbelievable. Southern Poverty Law Center puts out this thing called a hate map. And on this hate map, they now list a bunch of these groups. Well, what groups are we talking about? 230 chapters of the group called Moms for Liberty. This is a group that's been going to school board meetings. It's been basically saying, listen, we want in-school instruction, but we don't want all this propaganda and indoctrination being forced on our children. Another group being classified as a hate group is a group called No Left Turn in Education. This is a group based in Pennsylvania. 12 chapters of parental rights in education. And then also a group called Parents Involved in Education. And then Eagle Forum, which was Phyllis Schlafly's group based in Alton, Illinois. Now, nothing could be more outrageous than labeling parents who have every legal, constitutional, and moral right to oversee the education of their own children as somehow hateful. And you might ask, well, what is the Southern Poverty Law Center's basis for doing this? If you read the Southern Poverty Law Center report, it's all couched in a kind of verbal gobbledygook. It talks about these groups being, quote, inherently anti-democratic. How are they anti-democratic? They're actually exercising their democratic right to participate in local civic self-government. It also says that they reject pluralism and equity. How do they reject pluralism? Rejecting the trans agenda. This is the sleight of hand that has become so familiar. If you disagree with reparations, you're rejecting equality. If you disagree with the trans agenda, you're rejecting equity. So there's an easy equation between these broad slogans of inclusion and equity and then the very specific and very radical agenda that's promoted under those banners. You might expect the Southern Poverty Law Center to discuss Drag Queen Story Hour. No mention of it. You might expect them to discuss the fact that a lot of these books in school libraries, and in some cases even textbooks, have quasi or semi-pornographic content. No mention of that. You might talk about the fact that there's propaganda in schools to encourage children to change their gender. There's no mention of that. So in other words, the Southern Poverty Law Center leaves out what these parents are agitated about. It pretends like these people are somehow indistinguishable from the Ku Klux Klan. You know, the Ku Klux Klan opposed the gay agenda, and these guys oppose the gay agenda. So they're like the Ku Klux Klan. This is like Hitler liked vanilla ice cream. Dinesh likes vanilla ice cream. Dinesh is Hitler. This is a kind of rhetorical madness, a breakdown of common sense and logic. But what makes the Southern Poverty Law Center so dangerous is not the organization itself, but the fact that other people pay attention to it. So we know now from the Twitter files and other sources that government sources pay attention to Southern Poverty. They go, well, if these guys are hate groups, maybe they should be classified as hate groups by the Justice Department or by the FBI or by other other intelligence organizations. Or maybe digital platforms should now classify them as hate groups and restrict or censor their content. So the Southern Poverty Law Center is playing the role of an intermediary in trying to activate these other organizations which have the power of digital exclusion and in some cases have the power of the handcuffs and of arrest, and get those organizations to then take action against these groups. So it's an invidious alliance because it pretends to be the Southern Poverty Law Center goes, well, all we're doing is we're just engaged in the neutral business of evaluating organizations and labeling them. But the labels, this is kind of like putting a label on somebody. Hey, you wear a Star of David. And that label is then used to, you can't enter a school and you can't have shops over here and you've got to pay a special tax. So we see here, as we saw in other tyrannical societies, labels being used as a prerequisite to ostracism, to exclusion, and in some cases even to the infliction of physical harm. The Southern Poverty Law Center pretends to be fighting hate, but I think it's one of America's leading hate groups.